Great. Thank you all for joining. Welcome to the webinar. I don't think I have a slide today, which is totally fine. We'll just jump right into the settings webinar. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Zach Kinsey, the head of sales here at Concord, and happy to be talking through the settings with you today. I actually decided to, propose this because it's something that I wanted to do because I've had a lot of questions from our customers and our prospects about settings. And so we're going to take an in-depth dive and look into the settings in Concord. So let me go ahead and jump in here to the actual settings. And in whether you're in Horizon or the Classic, you can get to settings by clicking on that gear icon at the bottom left of the screen. And settings are a really important part of Concord. They're how we are going to control the notifications. They're how we set up, your users and folders and tags and teams. There's many different parts of the settings, and so I want to make sure that we cover those here in the system. So here I've got under my information. First of all, we've got our personal details. So one thing I do want to mention is with the settings, there are certain settings that you will only see if you're an administrator in the system, and those are the settings under company. So if you are an administrator, you'll see these things here. If you're not an administrator, you won't be able to see the things that are listed under the name company. But for the person should see these, and I want to quickly talk through, what this means and what you can do with this, even in the personal details. So this is where we're going to put in our, our picture, name and title and email. We also have our date format. This one's important for like our European versus US customers. So you can actually choose the date format that's defaulted inside of Concord. We do also have the display shortcut menu in the document button. So for those of you that are on Classic, what this means is when I'm actually in my inbox view, if I click new document, I'll have a drop down of my different options here. That is not the case when you're in Horizon. That's nothing that you don't need to have that turned on for Horizon because it works completely different. But for those of you that are in Classic View, if you have that turned on, then you'll be able to see the different options there when you click on that drop down. We do also have our two-factor authentication setup, which is here. So that's a security setup. If you wanted to set that up in the tool, you can. And so this is for like your login to FA. That's what this is for. And then down below we have my companies. So you can see here I've got a list of a bunch of different companies because I do have the subsidiary management feature enabled. And so I can click into one of these and set these up. Where that becomes important is if you're a company that has a lot of different entities or groups, you might want to have a different company name in each of those, or a different email address, even things like that. You can actually change the settings depending on which of those subsidiaries that you're in. So that's all there. We also have our notification center. So this is one of the things I probably get the most questions about. This is where you can come in and choose all of your preferences for your notifications. So first of all, we have that receiving weekly deadline reminders by email. So this is something where you can turn this on and then I can, simply receive the weekly deadline reminders or not. So what I mean by that is every Monday, we send from the system an email. It looks just like this. And it'll show you all of the upcoming deadlines for your contracts. I recently have had a couple of customers reach out and say, hey, our team members would really like for this not to be sent to them. They don't want to receive this. And the way that this notification works is if you have access to a document in Concord and you have the notification turned on, then you will receive that email. That's how it works. So if somebody doesn't want to receive that email, all they have to do is come into their notification center and they just turn this off, and then they will not receive that weekly email for deadline alerts. So that's something I want to point out there. If it's something you want to turn off, or somebody asks you about turning that off, you can do that. We do also have our email notifications. So this is where we can do the approval emails, like approval requested, approval step completed. Those are both going to be here. And one thing to mention about this too is you have the option between daily digest and the individual email. A daily digest is something that goes out once a day, and it's going to give you a recap of all the things that have happened during that day. Where I see people use this is if they are part of a lot of different contracts and they maybe would get a lot of notifications. They don't necessarily want an email for every single thing that's happening. They'd rather get kind of one email with everything. So that's where that daily digest comes into play. So you can choose if you want to get the notification at all, and you also can choose if you want individual emails or if you want a daily digest. And down here, it's very similar. You can do daily digest versus individual for a number of these. You can choose if you want to get the notifications when colleagues take action as opposed to external guests. So the notification center here, if you haven't taken a look at it, there's a lot you can do with it. And if you want to kind of limit and change how you're getting notified for different actions within Concord, this is where that would happen. The other thing you can change is how far out your notifications start. So for example, maybe they start 90 days before the actual deadline of the contract. So you can set this to 90 days before, for example, that's one thing that could happen there. We do also have the message templates. This is where you can come in and set up the template for what you want to send out from the system. So, like, let's say that you're sending out the same NDA over and over again, or the same sales contract over and over again, or the same HR document. I can come in here. So this is my title. This is internal only. So this is my HR template. Welcome to the team. And then you can have the message here. So that way you don't have to type this out. And I have some customers who use this and they have a very long message when they're sending out the invitation email. And so this is where you can set those templates up in the system and you can create as many as you want. That way, when you're going to send out that document, there's a drop down to select the message and you'll have those messages here already created. So that's our message templates. Moving down into the company preferences, and like I mentioned before, you only have access to these if you're an administrator in the tool. If you're just a normal standard user, you won't have access to these. So this is the preferences, which are here. And so from here, you can do a number of different things. We can add a company logo. So if you want to have your logo in the system in different places, you can, especially for the custom branding. But this is where you can add that. Let's say you have a number of different subsidiaries or entities and they have different logos. That's a great place to put that in. The next one we have here is our Concord support. This is where you can grant temporary access to our support team. So some of you have probably used this at this point. It's a newish feature. It came out last year, but that allows you to be able to give our team access to your account. If you want to help with some troubleshooting or setting up or different things, you can grant them some temporary access here. Now I want to talk through some of the different settings here because there's a lot of them, and I think there's some pretty cool things that you can actually activate that you may not even know about. And by the way, if you do have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat or the Q&A, and I'm happy to take them as they come. Next, we have password rotation. Pretty straightforward. A lot of companies have an internal policy that says, hey, you've got to, rotate this every 6 months and prevent the, reuse of this or whatever. And so we have a specific password rotation here. If that is one of your company policies for data security and for general security, then, you can enable that. Now, administrator access is something that I get a lot of questions about. So as an administrator, you technically have access to all the documents in Concord. However, if you have this turned off, you're not going to see all of the documents in Concord because you could search for them and find them, but they're basically kind of like hidden to you unless you were to specifically search for them. What administrator access does is this gives you visibility into every single document in the system, even if you're not part of that document. So, for example, you've got a document, you're an administrator, there's a document that the sales team generated, they've added someone from legal and finance, but they didn't specifically add you to that document. with administrator access, you'll still see that document pop up in your inbox view here. You'll be able to easily see it. And the reason for that is because you have that administrator access turned on. So I always tell people, if you're an administrator and you want to see all the documents, just make sure that that's turned on in the system. The next thing we have is our download link and fully signed emails. So once a document is fully signed, you can have a link that gets sent out where they can download the document directly to their computer. And this is a nice thing to have. It's something that I would probably recommend turning on for everyone, because that way the person that you're signing with doesn't have to come into Concord and then download it there. They'll get an email where they just click download and that document will download from the tool. Another thing we have is our download link and invitation emails. This will allow your users to include a link to download the document in the invitation email itself. So for those of you that are using Concord for sending things out for review and signature, this is a really nice one, because instead of having forcing that user to click into Concord and come into our system and work on the document, maybe you prefer to allow them to just download that document directly onto their computer. And so this is something where you can enable that here. We also have the required double authentication for your users, the signature here. So this is where you can force all your users to use a double authentication to sign their contracts. So we do have some customers that have really strict security requirements. And if you want to force that for your internal users as well as your external users, you can require that double authentication. So what that looks like is when they go to sign it, the system is going to send out like a text message or an email. They're going to have to authenticate themselves before they can sign that document. So it's just an additional layer of security. This one is the requirement for tagging on all documents. This is not necessarily as important with Horizon because we have a lot of auto things that are happening and there's different things there. But when tagging was really big in Concord, and that was kind of how we were driving a lot of the organization, we came up with this requiring users to add a tag to their document. So this is turned on when I upload a document into Concord. It's just going to remind them. And then you can also do one step more, which is mandatory tagging. So this is like, you have to tag this document. And so they'll have to be forced to add that tag. And the reason for that is when they upload a document, if you don't have that on, they probably will just forget to add a tag, and then, the document's not tagged properly. So that's something that you can enable if you want to. This is one where you can allow collaborators to e-sign. So a collaborator is a specific role in the system. There's a lot of, we have all of our different roles here. So let me just pull this up real quick. So we have viewer, collaborator, creator, etc. And when we first released these different roles, we didn't allow collaborators to sign because we didn't. But where this comes into play, it's just kind of like not what that was for. But where this comes into play is you may have a user who should be able to do like very limited things in the system, but then maybe you also need that type of user to be able to sign documents because there's reasons for that, and so that just allows that collaborator to be able to sign the document. We go back here. This is also request automatic signatures upon final approval. I would definitely always recommend having this turned on. Once that approval workflow completes, as long as this is checked on, it'll automatically send the email notification to the first signer. So if you have your signatories set up in the system, this is signed first, this is signed second, etc. As soon as that document is approved, it's going to kick off that signature workflow. We also have the enabling of AI features. This allows all users in the company to use Concord AI Copilot and AI key data extraction on documents they have access to. So if you turn this off, they just won't have the ability to use the Copilot or the AI extraction. If you have it turned on, they will be able to use that. Next, we have the ability to require security code for external guests to verify email. So basically, when they want to access a document that's been shared with them, if they haven't accessed it for a certain period of time, then it's going to require them to, to be able to access that. The next thing here, you can see that this data is being stored in Europe. We do have 3 different regions with our data storage. We have Europe, we have North America, and we have Australia. So if you ever wondered like where your data is hosted, that's where you can see it. If you're in Europe, by default, it should be Europe. If you're in the US, by default, it should be the US, and same thing for Australia. And then last of all, here we have our custom branding. So for those of you that have this enabled, this is one of our enterprise features. This allows you to put your logo on the emails that are being sent from the system. It can also come from your email server. So you can go ahead and set that up using the settings here. Great, so that's our preferences. Next, we do have our advanced notifications. This is if you wanted to be able to set up specific deadline views in the system, you can do that here as well. So we released this, I think, sometime last year. It's just kind of like additional layers to the system. So for example, you can choose you can find like all the shared deadline views, and any user assigned to receive the digest for which they are not already subscribed via shared views will automatically be added to these shared views. And so what this allows you to do is you can set up like specific deadline digest for that day or that week. And you can see the frequency here and who's going to receive those there as well. So this is a way to actually kind of customize that another step that we don't have with the other notifications. Okay. Next up, we have our users, which is where you can see a list of all the users that are in the system. As a reminder, we have many different user types in Concord, but this is where you see the list of just who has access to the system. You can see the status of the user. You can see if their two-factor is turned on or not, the team that they're part of when they joined, their role, those types of things. And if you want to add a new user, you can do that here as well. And we now have just recently added the ability to bulk upload users with an Excel spreadsheet. So if you want to create an Excel and then like bulk upload users here, you can do that as well. We do also have teams. This is where we're going to be able to see the teams in the system. And so I've got all my different teams or groups here, and then you can assign who's part of each team. That's a really important part of Concord because that's going to help you set up all of your document access rights through the tool. And then also that's where the notifications are going to be driven from, is based on the different teams there. We do also have our roles here. So this is where we can see the different roles in the system. I can see the type of role. And I have our standard system roles here. So these are like the default ones that are always there. And then you can also create custom roles on top of that. So let's say that you have a compliance officer and you want them to be able to do most things in the system, but not quite everything. And so in Concord, we have tons of different permissions within our roles. And so you could set up something very specific for that user. So you can choose, hey, should they be able to create documents, edit, sign, should they be able to update different properties or create fields? There's just lots of different options that we have here. So I would recommend going through this list sometime and just kind of looking at the different options, but those are all there. I'll move on because I know we're getting short on time. We have folders here. This is where we set up our folder structure. So choosing which folders we want to have in the system and then access to the folder. And as a reminder, we very much drive access based on the folders. So like what can you see is based on what folders you have access to. And also we drive the notifications based on folders as well. So that's all here. Next, we have our tags, which is where we can create our different tags. And then, of course, you can apply those to your different documents. And you can see how many documents the tags are applied to. And then we have our bulk upload process. This is where you can actually upload a document in bulk into the system. When you're very first getting started, obviously, this is a really important thing to do. So you can take all your documents, put them into a zip folder, and then you can bulk upload that into the platform. And at the very bottom, we have our subscription. So this is where you can check what subscription plan you're on. You can add payment methods here, see your invoices, cancel, things like that. So just kind of basic subscription things. I think I saw we've got a few questions here, so let's go back to that real quick. Does each individual read-only user need to switch on the weekly deadline reminder emails, or can the admin turn it on for all users? So by default, it's actually turned on for the user, so that it is default to on. They would need to turn it off if they don't want to see them anymore. But by default, any user that's in the system, it's going to be defaulted to on. Yeah, yeah, good question. Another question here, how do we turn off the email notifications for our internal signatories, which tell them that the external party to a document has signed, but ensure that the person who has circulated the document for signature continues to receive all emails in relation to the document? So really the only way to manage those notifications are here. And unfortunately, currently they are a individual user setting. So that user that doesn't want to see all those emails, they would need to come in here to the specific notification center. They're going to come down here to signature emails, and it would be this signature collected one right here. That the signature collected means, hey, the other party signed. And so that's where you would come in here and just turn this off, and then they won't receive those notifications anymore. But this currently is an individual setting. It's not something that the admins can turn on or off for users. Yeah. So you would just need to guide them to this section, and then they can turn that off and they won't receive those emails anymore. Okay. If you have any other questions, let me know. Really, the idea today was just to go through those settings because I think sometimes we overlook them. There seems to be a lot there because there is a lot there. I just wanted to make sure that you understood kind of what the different options are. There's many different ways we can customize and configure the tool. So I wanted to make sure that you could see all those. Yeah, so there's a question about can we personalize the document invitation per document? And the answer to that is definitely yes. So to do that, we'll just come in here. I'm going to kick this document off real quick. So there's a few different options that we have. We have the e-signature when you're sending the document out here. So like, let me change who signs here. Let me put in a specific person, just like this. Let me prepare the document first. Just give me 2 seconds here. I've got to remove, sorry, this document's a bad example because I have too many things set up. So if I just click request signature, that's just going to send a signature request without any specific like email or message that's going out to them. So if you did want to send a personal message out to them, you can click on share. And actually, so I'll share this with Ava. Oh, it's all right. Let me just go something like that. So I can the way that I like to send out my emails when someone's turn to sign is I just like to invite them to the document. So you can set them up as the signer, you'll put them there. You don't need to request that signature yet. And then you'll just put in their email address here and you can personalize the message directly here and then send that out. Because this is just sending them an email with that message and a link into that specific document. So the way that I always share documents through Concord for signature and review is by using the actual share button. And then I'm going to put their email address here, choose their edit rights, and put the message in, and then send that. And this is where you can also use that message template that I was showing earlier. So now I've got that message here, and that's it. And you can create directly from here. You can edit the subject of the document or of the email that's being sent out. There's a number of different options, but you just click on send and you're good to go. And then one other thing to point out here as well, let me just pull this up one more time, is when I go to send, I can click this and I can either say send now or save for later. So you got a few options there. But yeah, that's how you would customize it, is just do it through that share modal and then you can send it out from there. Um, yeah, if you'll maybe put a support ticket in, we may have changed that at some point. That's how it was before. So definitely if you could put a support ticket in, that'd be great. And I can mention it to the team as well. Yeah, about the automatically being toggled to on. That's how we had it. Maybe at some point someone decided to change that. I don't remember that or know about that, so maybe let's check with the team for sure. Great. I know we're about out of time. Hopefully, you've learned something today. There's a lot of settings in Concord. I think if you could take one thing away from this is just go in and start looking around, and you'll probably find some things that could make your usage of Concord easier. So, thank you all for your time. And if there's no more questions, I just hope everyone has a great rest of the day.